Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Burn the Corporate Fiction. Today, you guys get the avatar. Two reasons. One, I need a haircut. Two, feeling a little under the weather. So today, we're doing the avatar. I apologize if that offends anybody. But today, we're going to be talking about the Umbrella Corporation. Okay, I hopefully am going to be able to explain this in such a way that you are going to see that there aren't separate corporations in this country. Like, there's just one big corporation. And all of the other corporations, all these, there's Walmart or even defense contractors, the company I work for, the company you work for, all these companies are actually just basically departments of one massive tax plantation, one big giant corporate workhouse, right? And it's a membership corporation. I'm going to explain how we got there, and I'm going to get you to see it for what it actually is. But before I do so, let me say that, again, I'd like to announce that I will be speaking at the International Truth Expo in Quartzsite, Arizona on November 7th, 8th, and 9th is when it's being held. I'm not exactly sure when I'm going to speak or which days, but we're working all that out. But it should be a great time. There's going to be camping. There's going to be music. There's going to be a lot of our fellow truth warriors, whatever you want to call us. I hate the term truther. I just do. I hate that term. But, people that are awake and it's going to be a really good time. I know Mark Sargent's going, and several other well-known people, and we're getting the lineup together as we speak. If you guys would like to buy tickets or donate to the event, I will put the link in the description of this video. I don't know why I forgot beforehand. I meant to, but it's International Truth Expo. You guys can find the site as well. I put it on the previous video, so we'll go ahead and we'll get that going. I'll get that link up there, but it should be a great time. I'm very excited about it. It's a great opportunity to reach more people and wake them up, because the only way that this ends is when we reach a critical mass of awakening, which I actually am going to begin, kind of unrelated topic. I'm going to begin talking about something regarding the mass awakening that nobody can deny at this point. We have more people awake now than there has been in recent like ever, really, honestly, awake to the system and the way things are run, the matrix, right? So let me say hi to some of the people in the chat. We've got Austin Murphy was the first one here. Osram tuning in and eating tacos, he says. I like tacos as well. LJ, hopefully I answered your question. I'll address it in a little bit as well. Jace Ventura from Australia. Heck yeah. Australia. Yeah, you guys are troopers, man. Dylan Heron. Let's see who else we have here. Jerry, son of Mick. Good to see you, man. And with me, I actually have a fellow member of the Jurist Society, Corbett. How you doing today, Corbett?
I'm good.
Good. Yeah, so one of the things that it's interesting, I was thinking about this, and, astrologically, a little side topic, has almost nothing to do with law, but then again, everything has to do with law, because it's all a battle between good and evil, right? Just determining, it's determined by, transgression of the law or adherence to it would be good and evil, right? The knowledge of good and evil, positive, negative, etc. So England has decided to block out the sun. Well, we know they've been blocking out the sun everywhere for a long, long time. So they're just now admitting that they're going to do it. But the project in England that is going to block out the sun is called Project Satan. Literally, it's Satan. Right? So let me see if I can look up what the hell project this is. I know it's like stratospheric aerosol, something, but let me see if I can find the exact Project Satan. The reason I bring this up is Project Satan's a military project. I know it's like stratospheric aerosol something, but it's called Project Satan. And it got me thinking, calling it Project Satan. Let me try searching England. I actually just thought to bring this up, and that's why I don't have it prepared, so you'll have to forgive me. Okay, here, I'll share this. So it's called Planet Today, and we'll take a look at this real quick. Oh, hell no, we're not doing no I'm not a robot shit. Hold on. Satan, I'm trying to find a good tab blog. Satan. Sure, there. This one's got the actual acronym, if it loads. Well, my point in bringing this up is the sun, astrologically and historically in all cultures, has been associated with the ego and the consciousness, right? Now, a lot of people have been talking about how the sun has changed colors. Like, oh, they remember it when they were a kid, it was yellow. Now it's like a bright white. Some people say that they're using a solar simulator. Other people say that I don't know, that there's no difference, whatever. It's all in the mind or the eye of the beholder. It's up to your perception. But theoretically and historically, the sun has always been associated with the light of consciousness and the ego, the vital body and esotericism, et cetera, et cetera. So what if the changes in the sun are reflecting the changes in the mass awakening of humanity, the quickening of the consciousness, and how more of your average normies are capable of saying, like, hey, Hollywood and DC are controlled by a bunch of PDFs. The government is engineering the weather, right? They're poisoning us in our food and our water supplies. Like your average person is now, this is just common parlance, common conversation. And so what if they're trying so hard to block out the sun to sort of like slow that down? What if they're even panicking? What do you think, Corbett? Have you ever thought about that?
No, but it sounds like it's a feedback loop because if we're awakening and the sun's getting brighter, no pun intended, you're getting brighter, then it would be a feedback loop.
Right,
That
exactly.
means if they tried to dim it, then the brighter we get or the more awake that we become, they'll just have to try harder.
Here it is. This is what it's called. It's called stratospheric aerosol transport and nucleation. And of course, so this is what's funny because they don't, in acronyms, they never put the and, right? They never put the and. But they had to put the and in the acronym on this one, so it actually says Satan. So they could just put it right in your face. You know what I mean? Because technically it should just be SATN, Satin, right? Or whatever, Satan, whatever. But no, they have to put the acronym or the A in there as part of the acronym to get their full Satan. And that's what they call as, David Keith says, we call it Satan. No, I'm not making this up. And I've actually heard these people talk. So that's what they're launching over there in the UK. And I just thought that was kind of interesting, but that is not today's topic. So let's get us back on course here. I just thought that was a interesting little side note. The first video I want to show you guys actually is going to lead us right into the law. I'm going to actually have to share the tab. So let me open it real quick. Okay. Now, David Wilcock, let me preface this by saying I'm not a David Wilcock fan. I think he's a shill. But the purpose of this video, what is being said is entirely true. And I want to discuss that a little bit as a forerunner into how we got into this membership corporation, this umbrella corporation. Because the geoengineering, all of it, the concentrated poisoning or the concerted effort to poison your food, water, your skies, everything's all being done by just one massive corporation. You know, how are they able to simultaneously poison all the food, simultaneously poison all the water, simultaneously coordinate? How did they simultaneously coordinate the pandemic? How did they do that? Because it's all just one big corporation. That's it. So it's just the orders come down from up top and filter down through all the corporations, which are owned by other corporations, which are owned by other corporations, et cetera, et cetera. So check this out.
One of the things that I learned from whistleblowers from the cabal itself is that they have to work within something they call the rules. And this is very, very important. The rules are a body of spiritual principles that they must follow in order to be allowed to exist. Now, what do I mean by allowed to exist? I mean that they are aware that there are benevolent forces that will prevent them from achieving their goals unless we give them permission to enslave us. Ultimately, the universe is intelligent, alive, and conscious, and it is benevolent. It is a benevolent consciousness. That consciousness does not allow the negative to succeed unless it is invited. So the cabal has made a science, a very elaborate science, out of studying these arcane, occult, magical principles.
Yes, they have.
That allow them to get away with what they do. So they have to put out everything that tells you who they are in music videos, in these Super Bowl halftime shows, the Grammy Awards ceremonies. They're out there showing you the truth. This is what people are going to have so much trouble with once disclosure happens, is that these people actually practice black magic, and they are very, very good at it.
Yep. So what is that law? Right? So what is that law? What is that universal rule that he's talking about that allows them to do what they're doing? Well, it is ultimately, it's the foundation of all law. This is how everything all comes back to law. It's the foundation of all law. It's free will. That's why they have to do the revelation of the method. That's why they have to tell you what they're going to do. They show you these movies. They show you these, they put in articles. They put it in your face all the time what they're going to do. And you think it's entertainment. It's not entertainment. Your silence is consent. That's part of the law. If you do not object to it, it's interesting that it works that way, but it does. You have to actually object to it. You have to actually assert your rights. Otherwise, you're presumed to have none. And this is how the law is slanted in their favor. You have to know it. You have to use it. You have to assert your will to not go along with whatever it is that they're doing. And so that is the mysterious rule that they, they follow some kind of code, some kind of rule, right? Yeah, it's free will. They cannot violate free will. Going all the way back to the Garden of Eden, the devil cannot violate your free will. That's all it boils down to, right? So we're going to take a look at this real quick as a lead up into what we're talking about today. I want to show you. We're going to go back to this window, but I pulled up this PDF. This PDF is called A Treatise on the American Law of Administration. Now, everything's administration of trust right now. That's all it is. But in the beginning, even when we created the governments as the people, the sovereign above the governments, the grantor of the trust, they are a trust. That's why each governor's tenure or president's tenure is called an administration, because they're administering a trust. If you look up the word administration in Bouvier's Law Dictionary, it only ever refers to trust settlement, the conveyance of an estate for the benefit of some persons. Remember that, that's important, but I'm going to show you. If we go to, this is Bouvier's Law Dictionary, adapted to common law. Let's just keep it simple. It's the law of the United States and the Constitution, right? So we go down to AD. And so administration is going to be right around here. Administration. Look at this. Very first thing it says, after to administer, trusts. Administration, trusts. Administer only ever has anything to do with trusts. Okay, so this is called A Treatise on the Law of American Administration. It's by J.G. Warner. And what he says is, it starts off up here. I'm going to leave that highlighted, but it's so important to understand this, because this is the nature of what David Wilcock was just saying. My property is that which is mine. And see, people don't look at their body as their property. Your soul is your property. This is the very source of your will. Well, it's not the source of your will, but it's what you use to express your will to acquire property. So you have to understand the spiritual aspect of it. Communism can only work in an atheistic society where the leaders are generally satanic and want to dominate everybody. It's the only way it can work. That's why over in China, they only release Chinese Communist Party approved versions of the Bible, CCP approved versions of the Bible. So I see Ulick and Sis joined us. Good to see you guys. So he says that my property is that which is mine. That it only is mine which I acquire, hold, and dispose of by my will. Okay, it is my will which determines the acquisition of a thing, whether by me, whether originally by reducing to possession and thus making my property that which was no one's property before. So that's finding something somewhere. That's the very source of all abandoned property laws, actually, right? Is that, unless if something sits there abandoned, unused for a certain period of time, nobody leaves a note on it saying, hey, I own this, then it's considered res nullius, right? Meaning nobody owns it. It's nobody's property. Okay, so, or by contract, by which a thing becomes mine through concurrence of my will with that of its former owner, which is interesting about what a contract is. Contract is a concurrence of wills. That's it's the very best definition of what a contract is. It's a concurrence of wills. So no matter what you're contracting to do, contracts can be verbal, implied, or express, right? So that means express is written, implied means it's created situationally through presumption, and verbal means you just verbally agreed to it, right? So we go down here, and this is why I bring this up, is he says, oops, I lost it, didn't stay highlighted. Damn it. Sorry, guys. Anyways, he says the sphere of the law is the spiritual because it works upon and through the law alone. And I always have trouble finding this thing after I don't keep it highlighted. So, to which, yeah, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I think it's down here. Yep, right here. Okay, so, nope. There it is. Okay, so, for the sphere of the law is the spiritual. It operates upon and through the will alone. The law recognizes in the property of a deceased person his free will, that is the rational will, and enforces it. Now, this is interesting because this is where they've pulled you into this membership corporation through presumption. So where fact at law exists, fiction cannot exist. Okay, so where truth and law exist, fiction cannot exist. There's only one place in the entire body of law where fact and fiction meet, and that is in the will of a deceased person. And it is in that body of law that was fleshed out of how do we express the will of a dead person? How do we execute the will of a dead person? That entire body of law has been what has been used to capture us. And what do I mean by that? So if a person has a will, great, we execute it, whatever. Now, what if they do not have a will? It's the negative aspect of that concept, right? So it's the negative aspect of that concept. They say, what if a person doesn't have a will? Well, now the state gets to act as that person executing his will for him. They're supposed to act on behalf of that person and determine what his will would have been. And so they've basically pulled you into that, and that's called administration. So if an estate dies intestate, right? If a person dies and they're intestate, meaning they have no will, then the estate goes to the state, right? Presuming they have no heirs who can also claim it, but the estate goes to the state to be placed under administration. And now the state gets to usurp the sovereignty of that person in determining how their property will be used and disposed of. Does that make sense, Corbett? Did I explain that well, or should I simplify it more?
No, I've heard you talk about this before. That makes perfect sense to me. That we're intestate if we haven't expressed our will, especially on the record. Which kind of made me think, it's like, well, if parents had a living will, they've claimed it on the record, could they not be proactive before a baby is born and create a will on the baby's behalf? Just a question.
Well, here's the thing, though. So you're already pulled into this membership corporation as property. Okay. So you're already pulled into this membership corporation as property. Well, okay. So let's back up. Before I even get into this, I want to follow a train of thought to lead everyone into understanding what has happened and how you're part of this. So what determines the law you're under, Corbett? So law, what is law? Let's start with that. What is law, period?
Law is property.
That's it.
And your relationship to it.
That's it. That's all law is. It's that simple. Law is property. Law regards property, rather, right? Law itself is not property, but law regards property. That's all it determines, is whether or not, and if you want to break that down, like we just read from this treatise here, it is the respecting another's will. Did you violate another person's free will or not? That's what law is. Okay. And do they have that free will? And that is manifested as property and your relationship to your property, including your body. Okay, that's what law is. So what determines the law you're under, Corbett?
The contracts. Oh, your relationship to your property.
Whether your relationship, exactly.
Yeah, whether you have sole ownership or you have a shared equitable interest.
Right. So that's exactly right. More specifically, your estate. Now, what is your estate? Your estate, the substantive definition of an estate is your personality, your labor, and your property, which is the product of your personality. Your personality determines the choice of property, and your labor is what you do to acquire the property. And therefore, your property is the ultimate realization of your free will. Okay. Your property is the ultimate realization of your free will. So your estate is the expression of that free will. Now, if you have absolute title over your own estate and nobody has an interest in your estate, well, how could somebody have an interest in your estate? Well, very easily. As I used as an example before, if you were like an Irishman who wanted to come to the colonies in the 1600s and you didn't have anything, any property, but you still have an estate. Well, what is your estate? Your personality and your labor, even if you don't have property. So you could use that personality and labor, right? You could use that as collateral and create a contract, which is called a trust indenture. And you can say, listen, I'll labor. I don't have anything except for my personality and my labor. Okay, so I will labor for 5 years. Let's determine what is the value of this voyage. And the ship captain goes, 5 years labor. Okay, cool. We'll draw it up into a contract. And you go, all right, so I'll sign this contract and I pledge myself to 5 years labor in exchange for this voyage. So now what you've done is you've used your estate as collateral. Now the ship captain has a superior interest in your estate. right? So now that determines the law you're under. So basically you're under, obviously, the law everyone's already under. Don't kill people, don't do all that, right? And now you're under whatever regulation of that estate that the ship captain deems necessary. Those regulations become the new law for you. Okay. And now that's called having equitable interest in your own estate. Instead of having absolute interest in your own estate, you have an equitable interest in your own estate, right? So if the ship captain, and those equitable rights are drawn up as privileges and immunities. So the ship captain says, as part of the contract, you're like, well, I'm not going to agree to let you do whatever you want to me. So the ship captain will put in there a provision and say, during this indenture, the indentured has the right to not do such and such, or has the right to do such and such. And those are called privileges and immunities. And the word privilege comes from the word privity. And what is the word privity? The word privity is when property has an interest by two or more people. So when two or more people are interested in a piece of property, it's called privity. And that's where the word privilege comes from. And that's an equitable right, which is not actually a right. It's just a privilege or immunity granted by a contract or trust relationship. Okay, so now that we're getting all of this down, right, is so that new law becomes or your law is now whatever the ship captain deems, whatever that contract lays out. That's your new law. Right? That's what motor vehicle code is. That's what licensing. It's the regulation of the use of your property because your estate has been put up as collateral because you joined a membership corporation. Okay, which is going to bring me to my next point. Oh, by the way, those rights can only be enforced in equity. So I want to differentiate between law and equity real quick and tell you the main points of both. Law is what you're under when you're sovereign. It's common law. There is only one law. Everything. So all other forms of what you would call law and government stem out of common law, but are not common law. Okay, common law is the law of sovereigns. Common law is based on natural law. It's a manifestation of natural law in society. And basically it's do not violate anyone else's will. That's what common law is. So you can break down all the property right, everything about it. It's just do not violate somebody else's will. We'll keep it that simple. In this country, the United States, in this republic, we were sovereign. We were sovereign above the government. We are sovereign as the people above the government. But when you join the membership corporation through the 14th Amendment and become a trustee who gets privileges and immunities, and you're now enfranchised, you're an enfranchisement of this membership corporation, you have privileges and immunities and guaranteed benefits and protections, you're no longer sovereign. You're under administration. Okay, so that's how they kind of did. But all of those privileges. So when you have this absolute right to your property, it's law. You're under law, and you go enforce that right, those rights. If somebody somebody committed trespass or somebody assaulted you or stole from you, you go and you assert that at a common law court. At common law, you have absolute property. Now, if that property is shared and there's more than one person has an interest in it, each person only has an equitable right or equitable rights to the property, and that can only be adjudicated in a court of equity. Now, why do I bring this up? Because at a court of law, right, a sovereign can only be adjudged by sovereigns, which is why it took a jury to indict you and a jury to convict you, because this was a quorum of fellow sovereigns, a requisite number of fellow sovereigns necessary to condemn a sovereign upon evidence of a crime. Right? The judge can't do it. The state can't do it. Nobody can do it but the jury members. Okay? The state, the court is just an apparatus, a utility for those sovereigns to use, the juries to use. Right? So, in a court of equity, which is the only place where equitable rights can be enforced, the judge is God. The jury's only advisory, and the judge is literally God. Now you can see the incentive of why they would want to pull everybody into equity. How do you know they pulled you into equity? First of all, you are the trustee of your own estate as part of this membership corporation that we're getting into here. Secondly, when you go to court, they issue you a summons. A summons is descended from the subpoena, and the subpoena was created. So it's a subpoena in Chancery. Well, Chancery became equity now. And it's a summons in equity. Okay, so this is the history. This is called Practical Treatise on the Law of Trusts, and this is a very good book as well. And so he breaks it down that where the origin of the subpoena come from. So we go down here, I believe it is. Okay. We need Bishop Walbotham. Where did I? Hold on. Sorry, guys. Okay, there it is. So this is the original. So this came about when feudalism began, which is usufructuary, which is usury, which is basically allowing people to be the trustee or stewards of property that does not belong to them, which is a trust. It's a form of trust. Usufruct and trust are they're pretty much the same thing. And that's why this came about. So the king, basically what happened was in England, William the Conqueror came over, conquered, let them keep their law, but then engineered an invasion from Denmark, scared all the nobles into needing a military law to protect themselves. And so it made them amenable to King William's feudal idea, where he says, okay, well, first you have to give all of your land over to the king. So these nobles were all allodial title holders in England. I have proof of that in Blackstone's commentaries. I showed it on the last show that we did. So they had allodial title to their land, which is at common law absolute ownership, right? Which places them under common law, which is why common law was the English law. And so they register all their property to the crown, and then the crown gifts it back to them under certain conditions. So now it belongs to the king, but the king's going to let the former owner use it, sort of like a tenant. Like the king became the landlord and the former owner became a tenant on his own land. And now the use of that land comes with that title, comes with certain requirements, which became the new law called feudalism. And now the king was able to legislate the requirements for the use of the land, which everybody needed and had to use. And that changed the law from common law to whatever the fuck the king wanted it to be and parliament wanted it to be. And that's what happened in every country, by the way, not just England, but Australia and everywhere else. That's how they pulled you, by taking control of the ownership of all property and then making you property by getting you to join a membership corporation. They reduce you to property and regulate the use of that property. And that's what your statutes and codes are, right? When you have absolute title and ownership, there's none of that shit. They can't do that. So back to the subpoena. It says that, let's see, so originally the only pledge for the due execution of the trust was the faith and integrity of the trustee, meaning so the king granted the land, or the lord granted land to a knight and said, here's what you have to do to use this land. And the only pledge, there was no surety put up or whatever. It was just the faith and integrity, the honor of the usufruct, the person using it. Am I explaining this properly, Corbett?
Yeah, I'm following along.
Okay.
I've heard this several times, and every time it gets more ingrained into my little head.
So here, let's see here. Okay, so, but the mere feeling of honor proving as was unlikely when opposed to self-interest and extremely precarious security. What he's saying is that if someone had the ability to basically serve themselves by disobeying the trust indenture that they're under, for the use of the property, like, maybe I don't need to tell the Lord that I got this much in rents from the peasants. Maybe I could just tell him I got this much and keep some for myself, right? And since honor was the only surety, John Waltham, Bishop of Salisbury, thought, well, that's probably not good enough security to make sure these people execute their duties faithfully under this trust. So what he did, John Waltham, Bishop of Salisbury, a chancellor in the reign of Richard II, originated the writ of subpoena, by which the trustee was liable to be summoned. That's why they call it a summons now, because we don't have chancery anymore, but equity and chancery are basically the same thing. Liable to be summoned into chancery and compellable to answer upon oath the allegations of his set decay trust. So basically, they're compelling you to answer for your set decay use of your own property. Set decay means living trust use, right? So it's a set decay trust is a living trust. And so that means it's an ongoing usufructory situation where you're maintaining an estate that's presumed not to belong to you. So when they summons you to court, they're compelling you to answer for the misuse of your property according to their regulations, because they are the guardians, they are the administrators, they're the ones who determine how the property is used. That's how they pulled you out of common law into this bullshit system of equity, right? So if you don't believe me, we'll pop over here.
It all started with your fear of your safety, though.
Take a look at this. So infants cannot hold title to property. Infants cannot hold title. Infants are presumed to have no free will. Okay. So in determining the meaning of any act of Congress or of any ruling, regulation, or interpretation of the various administrative bureaus and agencies of the United States, the words person, human being, child, and individual shall include every infant member of the species Homo sapiens who's born alive at any stage of development. What does that mean? Shall include. Well, when something is included, it's at the exclusion of everything else. That is a maxim of law. So that's why you have the term including but not limited to, because you have to actually say that to expand the meaning within whatever you're writing to include more than just what you're stating right here. But when you only say include, you're excluding everything else. And so what that actually is saying is, in determining the meaning of any act of Congress, ruling, regulation, or interpretation of the various administrative bureaus, the words person, human being, child, and individual mean infant. So the United States 14th Amendment citizen is an infant, period, under administration, right? So, and this is the case in all countries. They've reduced you to infancy under administration. They've done that because they've mortgaged through the central banking system. They mortgage your estate in that's what I'm saying. It's all one big umbrella corporation. Even all the other countries are part of the same security scheme that places you under a trust indenture. So the United States Federal Reserve note, or what they mistakenly call a dollar, is the global reserve currency because it's where the security system started. The debt security scheme started here. And then the reason everyone adopted it as the reserve currency is because they adopted the same form of debt slavery in all of their own countries with their own central banks. And it's all one big security scheme. What is a security, Corbett? It's evidence of a debt. That's it. So what is the dollar? What is the Federal Reserve note? Let's talk about that. What is a Federal Reserve note? Federal Reserve note's a contract.
A promise to pay.
Yeah, it's just a contract. So in 1920, they made the Treasury independent so the Treasury could represent both sides of the contract because they anticipated doing this in 1933 and placing. See, what they've done is they've figured out a way to commodify your productive output, how to capture your productivity, your labor, your sweat equity. They figured out how to capture it without actually giving you anything but benefits, quote unquote, in return. Right? So let's break this down historically. Well, and I have a document that this guy actually is, we'll get to the state of manufacturing. Don't worry about that. But where did I open this? Right here. Okay, so this is satcom911.com. If you guys have never checked it out, this guy actually knows what I know. He's very, and we're not going to read this whole thing, but what I want to point out is originally the United States. So a corporation is a trust, and this gets a little confusing. A corporation is a form of a trust, right? And the United States has always been an English company for the purposes of doing business internationally and representing essentially the states collectively as a unified front on the world stage and world economy. But the states themselves and the United States are all a trust. So we, the sovereign people, created the states through the Articles of Confederation, and they were in a Confederate Union. And that's what they still technically are. That's never actually honestly been changed. It's a Confederate Union. What is a Confederate Union? Even Michigan's Confederate. I've proven this many times in their own revised statutes. They call themselves part of the Confederacy. So what is a Confederate Union? It means the sovereignty resides within each state as an individual nation itself. So you're not a United States citizen. Like Corbett's a South Carolinian and I'm a Michiganian. And our nations are in an alliance with one another, which allows us to have free trade between each other and free travel between each other. But we are two separate nations. That's what it confers. So we created the states, our individual nations, right? And the states are beneath us. The only purpose of government is ever to regulate commerce. That's why they had to turn you into a commercial product to be able to regulate you as property and tell you, you can't smoke that joint, you wear your seatbelt now and all that stuff, right? But before that, that's all they did was regulate commerce, had nothing to do with your personal property rights. We created the states. The states then got together and created even the states got together in what was called the United States and Congress assembled under the Articles of Confederation. But that didn't have the Commerce Clause or the back door open for the judiciary and the Bar Association to come in and usurp the sovereignty of the people, which was the intention behind the creation of this country the entire time, is what they intended to do, because the pesky kings and the popes were getting in these oligarchs' way of becoming gods on earth. So they needed to make everybody free and then make you stupid, steal your freedom, and keep it for themselves. And that's the situation we're in now. Keep it simple. So basically, we created the states. The states got together and wanted to create a stronger federal government with a higher risk of corruption, obviously, through the Commerce Clause. And that was their intention. So they got together and they created that trust. So that trust is the lowest on the totem pole, right? And it's created by the states and it's supposed to be subject to the states. And then the states are subject to us. So the federal government is our grandchild, basically. And so you'll see, like he puts it out, the elements of the voluntary trust established by the unanimous declaration of the 13th United States of America, hereinafter the Declaration of Trust, are as follows. The name of the trust is the United States of America. The trustor is the good people of these colonies, right? The good people of these colonies. The protectors are the people. The trustees are the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled, right? The property that they are managing in the trust, or that they're taking care of and performing the obligations of, are the confederation of these united colonies, free and independent states, right? And I know I'm losing some people, but I want to point, so they are the trustees, right? So they can never, ever, ever have jurisdiction over you. The way that they obtain jurisdiction over you, which is what I'm getting, is by making you an employee of their corporation, their trust. Well, first by turning it into a membership corporation, and then making you a member of that membership corporation, your personnel, federal personnel through Social Security. But I contest, most people can identify the Social Security as the point when everyone started accepting a benefit from the United States corporation. Therefore, you became federal personnel under the 14th Amendment, right? And you now no longer have rights, you have privileges and immunities, and your estate's under administration. But here's the thing. When we read the 14th Amendment itself, right? So we'll go 14th Amendment, pull this up. When we read the 14th Amendment itself, first of all, the people created the Constitution, created the government, right? This is talking about persons, which include corporations, right? So all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject, making you a subject, right, to the jurisdiction thereof, are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Okay. This shows the dual nationality. And if you're new to this channel and you don't know about the dual nationality, we'll just do this. Whoops. Let's go select all, delete McDonald. So we'll go to McDonald v. State. Indiana Supreme Court will tell you that, and if you guys have seen this a million times, so I'm not going to explain the case, but just real quick, it says that the evidence of bushing on his voir dire, which is what they use to make sure somebody can be a jurist or a member of the jury, that although he was not a citizen of the United States, he was a citizen and voter of the state. Under Section 2, Article 2 of our state constitution, one may be a citizen of the state and yet not a citizen of the United States, because the citizens of the states are the people. The citizens of the United States are enfranchisements, okay, who have not rights, but privileges and immunities. So what you have, it never says anything about rights in the 14th Amendment whatsoever. There's nothing about rights in the 14th Amendment, okay? And the reason they did this is so they could centralize the borrowing power, which already was centralized, but that centralization by design did not have collateral, very much collateral of its own. So, like you'll hear Donald Trump talk about, even after the creation of the 14th Amendment, the federal government relied on tariffs primarily to bring in large portion of their income, and then the proper tax system of regulation of commerce between the states, which is international commerce, but they relied on tariffs. That's how they brought in their income, right? International trade. Well, once they got the 14th Amendment ratified and they could start taking, the newly freed slaves as public chattel, and then getting other people to naturalize with the United States corporation and bringing them in, now they have their own collateral they can borrow against. Because by accepting, and this is the big thing, this is my point, is by accepting these privileges and immunities, you are taking a benefit from this corporation. So basically what they offered with the 14th Amendment is, and it was to the newly freed slaves who didn't have any rights at that point in time because they did not know how to be free, not because they were black, but because they had just been property and dependent on their plantation owners. And now they're all of a sudden free and have no idea how to maintain their own estate. That's what Andrew Johnson said about them when he vetoed the Civil Rights Act. He said it's unnecessary. They can learn to be free. There's no purpose in creating this federal citizenship, right? And basically committing trespass on the state's right to confer citizenship. So these privileges and immunities, basically what happened is, so they create the 14th Amendment. They say, okay, come be a part of our corporation. You've heard the term enfranchised or disenfranchised. Well, that's what enfranchisement is. Just like McDonald's, your local McDonald's is an enfranchisement of McDonald's itself as the huge corporation. Your local McDonald's is an enfranchisement of that large McDonald's. So now you become enfranchised, and as part of this membership corporation, you're going to borrow a portion of our sovereignty. So you look at it, the government's borrow a portion of our sovereignty as the people. Now the 14th Amendment citizen is going to borrow a little portion of the United States sovereignty because they don't have any of their own, right? In the form of privileges and immunities. And what this did was it allowed the District of Columbia to expand its jurisdiction outside of those 10 square miles like a big net and capture everybody under the jurisdiction of Congress. And then it also allowed them to do what? The validity of the public debt of the United States authorized by law shall not be questioned. Why is that in there? Because they intended, with the creation of this amendment in the first place, to use those infants as collateral. You're now an infant because you're not protecting yourself. You're accepting benefits in the form of privileges and immunities, which ultimately evolved into like welfare and Medicaid. And, we went over this last stream, Corbett, right? You do not have a right to food. You have a right to obtain food, to grow food, to labor towards food. You have a right to labor, yeah, but you do not have a right to just have food. You do not have a right to healthcare. That is not a thing. You have a right to labor, acquire property, money, whatever, and then trade that for somebody who knows how to give you healthcare. But you do not have just a right to healthcare. Right? So, and yes, now, as Make Stupid People Famous says, yes, they now are compelled benefits. Yes, going to jail is a compelled benefit, right? So that's why they call it corrections. You need to correct the infant pauper. Okay, so privileges and immunities. Now, once you accept these privileges and immunities, so you're basically giving over administrative control of your estate, which is how Congress was able to use it as collateral in 1933, right? So, and look, they had a discussion about this in 1967. Is it an equal protection law or tool of usurpation? House Congressional Record. We're not going to get into this, but it's a tool of usurpation, right? So, but 1933, that is how they were able to, the money will be worth 100 cents on the dollar because it's backed by the credit of the nation. It will represent a mortgage on all the homes and other property of all the people in the nation. Let's look at what they're really doing here. Let's look at what they're really doing here. What they've done is through a series of engineered crises, right? They forced everyone to become dependent on the United States and accept those privileges and immunities, especially after the Great Depression. Right now, they turn around and use that. So what happens? Remember when I had you guys look at the word settlement? You remember that settlement is the conveyance of an estate for the benefit of some person or persons. Conveyance gives the controlling interest of your estate. What is the estate? Your personality, labor, and property. Gives the controlling interest of your personality, labor, and property over to the person giving you benefits, because they are going to make your estate productive, meaning you productive, and then give you a portion of your productivity in the form of a benefit. Okay, so now they're able to use you as a massive pool of equity and then borrow from the international oligarchs that own the banks and large corporations, borrow money, and then create nonprofits, because everything has to be done for your benefit, create nonprofits, put themselves at the head of these nonprofits, and then funnel that money that they're borrowing against you as collateral into their own pockets while claiming it's for your benefit. It's what the Gates Foundation is. That's what the Clinton Foundation. Why do you think all these wealthy people have foundations? Why do you think all these politicians are part of NGOs and foundations? Because that's what they're doing. They've sold you out. They're farming you now. You're a farm. One big, and it's not just the United States. The whole world is a big corporate tax plantation. So back to what I was saying is at the Civil War, when Congress adjourned sine die, right, which means without a day. Yes, Peg says we're all slaves. Yes, this is true. Debt slaves, 100%. Right. So, and I think
slaves are better than others, right?
Well, yes,
Like
you're either a beast of burden or a driver of the same. So the only way to get free is to replace yourself as a slave. You're still a slave, but you replace yourself with a business and drive other slaves. That's the name of the game. You're feeding the machine when you do that, right? Instead of how we should be, where we just have our own estates. We're supposed to be agrarian farmers, right? If you want to participate in society, you need to have a trade that you can trade for wealth or food or whatever it is you need. There should, so welfare. So they turned us into a big tax plantation, okay, simply put. And this tax plantation with the Federal Reserve, that's what I was saying. So we go back to the Civil War. When Congress adjourned sine die, right, the de jure trusts that were created by the people essentially just went dormant. They're still there. They just went dormant. And what happened was, using the executive power of the federal trust, right, this little monster that was supposed to be caged into, I'll show you right here. Okay. This little monster that was supposed to be caged in right here. That's why there's boundary stones around it. Okay. What do the boundary stones show? Well, on one side, it says jurisdiction of United States. On the other side, it says Maryland. Why? Because out here, there is no jurisdiction of the United States. That doesn't exist. Well, what they did with the Civil War was they reformed it under the executive powers of the federal trust. This little monster, right, basically declared war on the Confederation of States and their sovereignty. Okay. And then those who wanted to join it, like the dark side, like the fucking Sith, okay, came under a new corporate union that ultimately manifested in 1871. And this corporate union has the federal government as the welfare daddy of all the states. And that's how it ensures compliance. Okay, that's what happened after the bankruptcy in 1933. So now the federal government is welfare daddy to all the states. Look at the levers of power that Trump uses. He says, I'll shut off your funding. Yeah, you don't want to take this up, which I support a lot of what he's making the states do, because the states are just rogue and they sold you out a long time ago, right? But when you look at the levers he's using and how he's able to use them, that's because this is what happened after the Civil War. Was the union became corporate, meaning now the federal government became the headquarters of a corporate 14th Amendment enfranchisement of all the states. Okay. And then agreed to fund them through the collateral that they were going to start borrowing against the 14th Amendment citizen. And this is how all the states get a piece of the pie. And then with the Buck Act, they could end up directly enforcing these revenue collection. That's where state income tax and state property tax and all that stuff comes from. as being able to fine and fee you for the use of the property as a trustee. They're fining and feeing you for the set decay use of your own property because you are an infant pauper trustee of your own estate. You, as one of the people, are presumed dead or missing, presumed dead, rather. And then you, as a 14th Amendment infant pauper trustee, are taking care of the estate of you as one of the people presumed dead, right? You're taking care of that estate, but it's not yours, including your body, because that body belongs to, as chattel, right, belongs to the estate. And so they're able to regulate the use of your body. So they became a membership corporation. That's what the 14th Amendment is. When you naturalize under the 14th Amendment with the United States, which we go over here, and we see that in Black's Law Dictionary, it says right here, it creates, under 14th Amendment, it creates or at least recognizes for the first time the citizenship of the United States as distinct from that of the states. Okay? So you join this membership corporation, you get a participation share, basically, which is your ability to vote. Your vote doesn't mean anything. It's just like a suggestion, because only the real owners are actually going to be able to vote. Those are the electors, right? But you get a participation interest in this corporation, and in exchange for the control and administration of your estate as an infant, they give you privileges and immunities, which are called civil rights, which often the enforcement of which require the transgression of actual rights. Okay? What do I mean by that? Well, you have a right to health care. Yeah, how are we paying for that? Well, I'm going to turn around and take money from you as a productive individual at gunpoint so that I can give to them for their civil right. Right? That's what civil rights are, the privileges. And often the enforcement of which require the transgression of actual rights. That's what England is doing carte blanche right now. But, oh, you can't offend these people. It's their right to not be offended. So what is it? How do you enforce the right to not be offended? Well, you have to abridge the actual right of free expression. So in order to grant these privileges and immunities, you have to take away actual rights. Does that make sense, Corbett?
Absolutely.
So you became part of this membership corporation, which allows them to use you as collateral. Now, the next phase in their plan, right, is start the central bank back up, because Andrew Johnson kicked the central banking system square in the scrotum, right? And it took them over 70 years to recover from the ass kicking that Jackson gave them. Everybody remembers Jackson for being mean to the Indians. Fuck that. Right? No, Jackson was a great man. He killed the bank. And they didn't come back in till under a fucking Democrat, of course, Woodrow Wilson, right? Because Democrat is synonymous with communist. I don't get, I don't subscribe to the two-party system at all. I think they're all fucking communists who sold out at this point in time. But Democrats are overtly in-your-face communist. And if you look at the worst things that have been done to us, aside from the Civil War, which was done by a Republican, but he was financially intelligent and they had to kill him. He didn't want to start a central bank. That's one of the reasons he got killed. He also wanted to return the states to their pre-war status, not as a subject of the federal government under this new system they were trying to create, but back as a sovereign confederacy, a Confederate Union. All the states are Confederate. Make no mistake. Anybody who challenges me on that, I'll prove it in a heartbeat. He wanted to restore that original union, and no, that's not the intention. We're creating a corporate union because corporations are and always have been the enemy. Actually, your greatest enemy is the Bar Association. All problems, 100% of problems occurring in any country you happen to be watching this from is because of your local Bar Association. Without question. Attorneys are the enemy of mankind. They are direct servants of the devil, and they are anyone who swears allegiance to the bar is a commie, subversive, demonic fucktard, period. Okay. Not that I'm very passionate about that or anything, or have any kind of animosity towards them. I mean, but these people are your enemy. The second greatest enemy to mankind is the corporation. Okay. The concept of the corporation is the realm of the dead. That's what corporations, they're the realm of the dead. By becoming part of this membership corporation, you now only have equitable interest in your own estate. meaning you only have equitable rights, which are called civil rights. What is equity? Equity is an interest in something. Okay, just partial interest though. Like you don't have absolute interest. It's just that you have some interest in this, that you receive some benefit from it, and that's what equity ultimately is. Despite the many different definitions of equity, that's what it really is. That is the common denominator of all the different ways that that word is used. That's what equity is. That's why you're in courts of equity, which are ruled by judges as gods. Okay, so by becoming part of this membership corporation, you receive benefits, privileges, and immunities, and you now only have equitable rights in your own estate because it's under administration, meaning they determine how you use the property of your estate, including your body, and any kind of civil right, which is a privilege or immunity, must be enforced in equity, which equity was only ever created to determine contracts, uses, and trusts, and not actual law. That's why equity is not law. So we can go to the actual Constitution, Article 3, Section 2, right? Article 3, Section 2. I had some dumbass who wanted to debate me on law, and I think he just wanted to, try to go after a channel that was bigger than his to get. And I told him, I said, first, before you ever even drag me into any debate and waste my time, you need to know the difference between law and equity. So Article 3, Section 2 says the judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity, meaning equity is not law. But now all of the courts only operate in equity, which means they're not operating in law. So what is equity? Equity is the enforcement, right, and interpretation of contracts, uses, and trusts. Okay, because that's private law. That's a law between people who have consented to be under this arrangement or agreement, right? And you can't actually apply actual law to that. So it is now determined by what they would like you to think is a wise man, right? Sitting there, a King Solomon, if you will, being able to determine what's equitable using his own conscience, which is supposed to be divine and spiritual. That's why he wears the black robe. It's priest. You're having priest. So before it was equity, it was chancery. And what you would do when you went to a chancellor for relief, it was called praying to the chancellor. You pray in a court of chancery, right? Because it's run by priests, because it's all determining the feminine aspect of society, which is agreements, and it's supposed to be compassion, stuff like that. But it's equity is like the female to the male law, right? And even Blackstone said equity without law is dangerous. Like there will be as many different established rules of procedure as there are vices and differences in the minds of men. Law is just law. It doesn't change. It stays the same. You know why? Because men don't write. It's just the law. What is the law? Don't violate someone's free will. That is it. That's clear cut and dry. You can't do, but when you get into private law between people through contract or trust arrangement, now it allows man to become God and make law through that agreement. And that's why they need your consent. Because now you've consented to come on, and that's what the corporation is this big, massive world of fiction based on contract and consent, where they can now just change where the law, quote unquote law, which is actually just equity, is fluid and changeable, and they can use it to their advantage because it's all just based on an agreement, as long as they keep giving you benefits, right? What do you think, Corbett?
Absolutely. You're praying if you're in a court.
Well, yeah, if you're not in a court of law.
Well, they call them courts of law, but they're not.
They're not.
Yeah.
They're not. And so it's all to harness your productive value, right? This whole one big corporation has been created to harness your productive value. And let's think about
get our loose.
Right. So everything has to be done for your benefit. So we can look under Title 42, right? Like we did on the last stream here. And so this is public health and welfare. That's where the National Space Program is. So they had to create the National Space Program under public welfare because it has to be for your benefit, because they're administering the estates of infant paupers, and everything they do has to be for your benefit because there's no actual money in this country There's only debt, evidences of debt in the form of promises to pay on behalf of the United States corporation, which is secured by your sweat equity. And then the wealthy people take these promises to pay and convert it into actual wealth, such as gold, silver, jewelry, land, and other resources. Okay. And they're siphoning you vampirically, your productive value, without actually even giving you anything. There's nothing. All there is debt, right? And it's one massive fucking corporation siphoning your productive value and making them gods on earth. And now here's the thing about that is they're now coming to a point where that's no longer necessary to have you. They've already built their empires. They've taken control of everything. And now that you're waking up, you're becoming quite burdensome. And so now we have the state of U.S. manufacturing. So I showed this a couple streams. If not, it might have been the last stream I showed this, but I meant to go into it a little bit more. So not my governor, but the governor of this administrative department of the corporate state called Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, right? Gretchen Whitmer, in 2022, welcomed the World Economic Forum into our state. And in researching this, I found that we're actually the home of Automation Alley, which is down by Detroit in Oakland County, where I'm actually from. And or that might be Macomb, but there's another one that's in Oakland County also that's part of this. And this isn't just for Michigan. This is where they're setting up shop to take control of all manufacturing throughout the entire United States. Okay, this is very important because they intend on replacing you with AI. And not only that, but this is how they're going to introduce the social credit score. So they're not going to be able to do it through the government. Instead, at least not in this country. So instead, what they did was they took control of all of the industries. And now they're going to introduce a social credit score by making, basically, like I said, taking its mask off and revealing that all these different industries, all these different corporations are just one big corporation that communicate and speak with each other and are all working together to enslave you and take control of all of your resources. And they're going to introduce smart monitoring systems to essentially evaluate you and determine whether or not you're useful. And what you do at one company is going to follow you to any other company you ever go to, because what they're doing is they're integrating all of this smart manufacturing, smart devices. So what is a smart factory? Smart factory is a highly digitized, connected production facility that relies on smart manufacturing, right? So they're going to requires an internal factory-wide computer and communications network to be implemented to connect Internet of Things devices. The Internet of Things devices is a network of physical objects, devices, vehicles, buildings, and other items embedded with electronic software, sensors, and network connectivity that enables these objects to collect and exchange data. So they're going to use your phone. They're going to use everything, right? They're going to be watching you, everything that you're doing. So, and this is where the social credit system is going to be introduced right here. Because, again, we live on one massive tax plantation. So I'm actually going to...
You mean revealed.
Right, revealed.
Yeah. They're already using it. And we've always had a social credit score, but it was called credit.
Right, so your Facebook posts, right, your X posts, all these different posts are going to determine whether or not you can get a job. I actually know somebody right now who's high up in his field, makes a lot of money. I'm not going to name anybody, but he cannot get a job right now because of his Facebook posts. We're talking about a guy that works for like titans of industry, and they won't hire him because of his beliefs, because it's all on, he puts it all on his social media. So they know about it. They're not going to hire him. There's your social credit. What more social credit do you need? You're not allowed to have that's fine. You can have your right, your freedom of expression, your right to say and do whatever you want. You just won't be able to feed your family. That's how they're going to get you, just like how they tried to do through the pandemic. And so they couldn't get the government to implement all these regulations, and all this shit. So they used the corporations upon which you rely for everything you need to live and maintain your life. That's how they're coming at it. They've given up on going after the government, at least in this country, directly, and now they're just going after the corporations and the resources, and they're going to use that to pull you into compliance with their New World Order agenda. What do you think of that, Corbett?
I think that only works if you have a certain percentage of people that are unaware of the situation they currently find themselves. Because everybody seems to think that, oh, I just work hard and get ahead and I can get this and I can get that, and I'm better than the Joneses right next door. But they don't realize that the Joneses are in the same situation.
Exactly. It's like the slow boil of a frog, and people don't realize that they're sitting in the pot, and the pot's almost all the way up to a boil. Now, what's interesting to me is like the introduction of this, and I'm not saying anything. I like a lot of what Trump's doing. I would have to have Stockholm syndrome to fucking trust any portion of the government with anything, but I like what he's doing. The fruits of what he's doing is in direct contradiction to what the globalists have been setting up. But now, being objective and being the skeptical person that I am, to say it's quite interesting they set this thing up in 2022 almost as if they knew that Trump was gonna issue those tariffs this year, that it was likely he was going to be elected, and that he was going to issue these tariffs, which is going to bring all manufacturing back to the United States. Think about that. We are the main consumer economy. We are the main market that all the other nations want to be in, is the United States. That is his economic power as the CEO of this membership corporation, of which everyone is a part of now. And so as that CEO, he's able to wield this economic might to influence foreign trade policy, and also to influence social policies in foreign countries as well. Like he told England, until you stop, arresting your citizens for Facebook posts, we're going to have some strained trade relations. And so he uses this economic might, right? But it's almost like the World Economic Forum knew that. And then it's almost like, Klaus Schwab stepped down, but then he's replaced by somebody who's just as bad. So it's like this false sense of victory, for instance. So I'm interested to see how this unfolds under the Trump administration, how they continue to implement all this artificial intelligence, because they want to replace you, right? And so what happens to all the displaced people? I don't know, right? I don't know. That's a question that nobody can seem to answer, because not everybody can be a robot polisher, right?
Yeah, we had this discussion the other day, and each time there was a revolution, industrial revolution, each time there was a revolt, people tried to destroy certain things, but everybody found a job somehow. And I think that's going to happen again, I hope.
Jerry points out makes a good point here. Truly showing you're an infant and capable of looking after yourself. 100%. That is what this is. AI is going to be the new babysitter, and AI is going to do most of the work that they don't need you to do anymore. You're an infant, right? Now, here's the thing. So it's not all doom and gloom. The 14th Amendment is the linchpin to this whole system. Okay, the 14th Amendment, as if you're just joining us, as I showed you, you can be a citizen and voter of the state. This is McDonald v. State. The citation is 90. That's the book that it's in, or the title, I forget what they call it, but like if you go under like Harvard Law Access Project, right, and you want to look up any case or in a law library, this is going to be the book that it's under, basically. So it'll have a bunch of titles, 1 through wherever the court's at right now, which will be hundreds, and you're going to click 90, okay, and it's 90, and IND is Indiana Supreme Court, okay. So, and then it's 320. And then I've got a way that I showed the jurists of how I search things. So I just do Control F on the page once I find the book 90, and I do Control F, and I'll just type McDonald v. State into the find bar, and then it'll pull it right up. And that's the easiest way to do it. But you can be a citizen of the state and not one may be a citizen of a state and yet not a citizen of the United States, because it's voluntary. It is a voluntary, but it places you under the jurisdiction of Congress. Once you become a United States citizen, you agree to give controlling interest of your estate over to the federal corporation in exchange for privileges, immunities, and benefits like welfare and Social Security. But as such, what you are saying is I'm incapable of protecting myself, of securing my own rights, and I am incapable of providing for my retirement or sustenance during my life. Ergo, I am an incapacitated person, incapable of holding title or accessing common law. That's what you do when you become a 14th Amendment citizen. But because the 14th Amendment, first of all, is voluntary, right? And second of all, was technically never lawfully ratified, which is what this entire congressional record's about. As we take a look at all the people that vetoed the 14th Amendment, they required 3/4 of a majority to ratify this. There were 36 states in the Union at that time. And out of 37 states, out of 37 states, 15 of them did not ratify this amendment. So it was never actually amended. But because it was a wartime situation, the federal government was territorially occupying the states, or the federal corporation, let's call it for what it is. Federal corporation was territorially occupying the states. Congress just said, fuck it, it's ratified anyway. And now, because the Bar Association has infiltrated every facet of our government, there is no judge that will recognize this fact, this constitutional fact, that it was never ratified. But aside from that, that is a fact, right? But no judge, no bar pirate will ever acknowledge this blatant fact that's recorded on congressional record. And because of that, and because people erroneously think that the Supreme Court interprets the law, which they do not do such a thing, okay, at all. They can't interpret the very document that created them. That doesn't make sense. That is the real holding of Marbury versus Madison. It's just point blank period. Any law repugnant to the Constitution is null and void. Doesn't fucking matter what the Supreme Court said. Does not matter. That's why you have a Second Amendment, by the way. Which, I get the feeling sometimes we're getting very close to needing another 1776, without a doubt. But if we can't get rid of these bar pirates in the central banking situation, and we can't get rid of this 14th Amendment, this 14th Amendment is the linchpin. You can leave, as a matter of fact, you can leave the Bar Association, you can leave the central banking system and take away the 14th Amendment. What do they have to borrow against? Corbett. If you take away the 14th Amendment, what do they have?
Sorry, I was on mute. They don't have anything. They just got those tariffs and their little dominions like Puerto Rico and Guam.
That's it. That's all they have. And so Congress is left holding the bag. And this is what I teach people to do in the Jurist Society. Corbett's a jurist, part of the Jurist Society, and this is what we do. It's everything to answer your question, LJ, if you're still watching, to answer your question. Everything that you do to express your will, including claiming your estate or altering title or changing title to property, right? We're affecting the title of property. It all happens on the record. That county record is your notice to the world. And that county record, when something's on the record and it stands unrebutted, it is the highest form of evidence at law. It's on the record. Before registration in this country, which registration is what you do to become a 14th Amendment, when you register something, you give controlling interest over to whomever you're registering it with, right? So when you register your car, it becomes a state car. No, it doesn't. Yeah, it does. That's why they give you their plate to put on the back of it, because it's now theirs, right? But it's connected to you through usufructuary relationship, meaning you have the right to use it, but you have to use it the way they tell you to. Right. So when a vehicle is registered like that, you can never fight motor vehicle code when it's registered, because it's not your vehicle. It's their vehicle. You gave it to them. OK, so not to mention the word vehicle is a commercial term. But here's the thing. As a 14th Amendment citizen, you are considered to be a resident of your state, meaning a foreigner who's there to conduct commercial activity, commercial business. You're engaged in commercial enterprise at all times as a 14th Amendment citizen. Everything is commerce for you. You are chattel in commerce in general. So back to my original point, though, when you register something, you give controlling interest over to it. You give controlling interest of it over to whomever you're registering it with, right? So the 14th Amendment, if you take that away, if you affect the title, you say, hey, listen, I'm no longer under administration. I claim my estate and everything attached to it. And we teach how to do this in the Jurist Society. You're basically rebutting every presumption they could ever use against you in court or anywhere else, the IRS, any credit agency, whatever the case may be. And because everything that they're doing, from monitoring your credit report to telling you how to use your property to everything they're doing is the administration of an infant estate under the 14th Amendment. When you remove this 14th Amendment, they have no linchpin over you. In fact, this happened before they blanket covered everybody under the 14th Amendment through the New Deal, where everybody accepted Social Security and welfare benefit. And see how they did that? This is what I mean by it's one big umbrella corporation, is they made Social Security number a requirement to work, because these are pauper workhouses, right? And they're all operating in the debt fiat system, which is represented by your sweat equity. It's all just contracts, right? So you have to have this Social Security number to be employed, quote unquote, right? And you couldn't survive on your own. That's why if you have a trade and you can make your own money, cash money, or whatever the case may be, then you can be free. But like when you're employed by a corporation, it becomes much more difficult. So let's take a look at, what was I going to look up just now? Oh yeah, Long v. Rasmussen. Right here. Oh, case text. It's not going to come up on case text. Yeah, they got rid of case text. So we are going to want to go to 281F. Yeah, it's not. See, look, they got rid of this. Well, Long v. Rasmussen, which I've shown many times, and I have it somewhere else, says that. And I should have pulled it up beforehand. But is that citizens of a state and taxpayers, revenue codes are for taxpayers only, not for non-taxpayers. I know I have it around here somewhere in another document. Here it is. Okay, boom, look at that. Yeah, fuck you guys from Harvard. Yeah, I don't care if you no longer have it's available. It doesn't matter to me because I have it right here. So let me go back. Boom. Okay, this is this Long v. Rasmussen? I hope so. Should be. No, this is agency law contract. Sorry, guys. Bear with me for a second. Ex parte Thistleton. I thought I just pulled it over. Oh, this is Eric Rasmussen. That's why. I know I pulled it up because I used it to put together a travel packet, which I'm actually going to show on one of these next several shows. But anyways, I have it and I have it printed and I'll make it available for you guys because they're trying to make it increasingly difficult to find. But Long v. Rasmussen is basically this revenue code collector, this IRS agent tried to take this lady's property for income tax. And she was a state citizen, which it never says state or federal citizen, but this is the case because state citizens are non-taxpayers. And federal citizens are taxpayers because they pay the income tax because their property is being used as collateral against the central bank. And this was in 1922. And they said the revenue codes apply to taxpayers, not to non-taxpayers. With them, Congress does not presume to deal. Okay. And there's been no laws concerning their ability to have access to common law, basically, is what the case says. And so my point in saying this is when you're a state citizen, you're a non-taxpayer. They can no longer hypothecate your estate because your estate's not under administration any longer. When you are a federal citizen, and look, this is exactly what's going on. We have fiduciary foundations of administrative law. Congress and the president acting, it says the emerging fiduciary model. And remember, the word administrative only ever deals with trusts, right? So they made you a trustee of your own estate by, well, for instance, this is where they grandfathered in the Poor Laws and the Settlement Act and all that stuff came in from England. You're wondering, how did they do this? Because it's part of the body of common law, and it always has been. But it's like a door that you can exit common law from. You can walk out that door, and now you are in. And that door opens by accepting a benefit. When you accept the benefit, you settle your estate because you've become a charge to the state or the township or the county or whoever you're accepting a benefit from. You've become a charge to them. So they automatically, by operation of common law, get controlling interest of your estate. Now they create an alternative form of what you could call law, but it's really just part the regulation of property through a trust arrangement. And by regulating your property, they create statutes and codes determining how you use your property because you've come under their administration. Sometimes I feel like I'm not explaining this well, and maybe it's too complicated. Do you understand what I'm saying, right, Corbett?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I recommend to anybody that they go and they listen to a lot of this. And the best way to learn it is to explain it to someone else. I think your dad said you're 5 times more likely to remember something if you explain it to somebody.
Well, also, the better you understand something, the more simply you can explain it. And that's my goal at the end of the day, is to be able to explain this simply. But I mean, with such a complex subject, there's just basic dynamics you have to understand about the operation of law. There is only one law, it's common law. Okay. But if you're using property that belongs to somebody else, or you accept a benefit from the state, say, or the crown, or wherever you're at, right? You, by operation of law, automatically settle your estate with them, because now what you're saying is I cannot survive on my own. So you have to make my estate productive. And then they give you a portion of your productivity in the form of a benefit. Okay. But as a result, they get to tell you what to do with all the property of that estate, because it's now under administration. You have lost your free will. Your free will has been probated. You have lost it. You no longer can exercise it because you're not independent. You're not free. You can't take care of yourself. And that's how they get you. So, once they bankrupted everybody and got everybody and took everyone's gold and then drugged them into the Social Security system, right? That's what created the fiduciary model of administrative law. So what this sentence, I'll show you exactly in congressional record where what this sentence happened, where what this sentence says happened. The emerging fiduciary model in administrative law posits that administrative agencies are endowed with authority to set regulatory policy, which is the regulation of your property. When Congress and the president acting jointly as proxy settlers for the sovereign people, and trust them with regulatory discretion over an area of public concern. So, proxy settler, what they're saying is that Congress and the president mortgaged your estate. What is your estate? Your personality, labor, and property. So you have to think about this critically, and this is when it blew my mind. If you look at this congressional record from 1933, okay, and they say the money will be worth 100 cents on the dollar because it's backed by the credit of the nation. It represents a mortgage on all the homes and other property of all the people in the nation. So you take mortgage. When something's mortgaged, right, it's put up as collateral for a loan. Mortgage means dead pledge, because whatever is put up as the collateral, okay, is held in trust, and the lender gets the beneficial use of that property held in trust until the debtor pays it back. So how do they get benefit? So what did they mortgage, Corbett? What is held in, what has been mortgaged?
Your property, your body.
Us.
They own you.
We've been mortgaged.
You.
So we're held in trust, and the bankers, the lenders, the municipal corporations, they get the beneficial use of the property while the loan is outstanding, which is, it takes the form of revenue codes, property taxes, and income taxes, which the motor vehicle code is a form of revenue code, period. Okay, so now think about this aspect of it critically as well. So they're saying that the Federal Reserve note represents a mortgage on all the homes and other property of all the people in the nation. This is proxy settling your estate. Well, that's what I'm getting you to understand. That's what this says, is because how do they mortgage property that you don't own yet? How do they mortgage the property of future generations that they don't own yet? How do they do that? Because they don't actually mortgage the property itself. They mortgage your right to it. Which is your estate.
Well, if you think about it, if you're under common law, the only trust that you have is the trust between you and God. And, part of common law is do no harm to others.
Well, Peg's Place brings up a good point. They got, hold on, I'm trying to find my cursor here. Where the hell are you at? There it is. Okay. They got me because of cancer problems I had. Medical industry always be in my life nowadays. Okay. So that's right. Now, why do you think that through overprinting these debt contracts called money, which are not money, right? Currency, Federal Reserve notes, by overprinting them, they inflate the value of your sweat equity, which causes everything else to become more expensive. And they continue to do that over the course of decades, so that even something as simple as buying a car requires a loan. That's why they do that, so that you have to go into debt for everything. This whole thing is one big debt spider web. that has captured your productive value. And these courts, so all these nations are now just basically various departments of one big worldwide corporation controlled by the bankers. Okay. And what the Federal Reserve Note allows them to do is capture the productive capacity of all the people through corporations that are created under the bylaws of the one corporation, which is the United States in our instance over here, right? And they capture your productive value. And so what are you really making? If there's no money in the country, what you're doing is you're harvesting resources, processing and manufacturing those resources into products, and then producing those products. And that's all this. It's a big game of Monopoly. That's it. That's all you're doing. And you're not actually getting anything in return for it. Right. So it's like, imagine in my mind's eye, I see like a big tractor beam just sucking up all the resources of the planet through the Federal Reserve Note, through the corporations.
Well, if you follow that logic, then you have a one world government, all based upon that.
We've had a one world government for a long time.
Yeah.
Right. So the one world government, it's actually interesting. I got to thinking, everybody thinks about 7 years of tribulation in the book of Revelations, but years aren't the same in the Bible as we take them as the revolution of the sun around the earth and its transit through the tropics and all that we know the earth is a stationary plane. So, that's how we think about year doesn't necessarily mean that in the Bible. And when I was thinking about it, they say there will be a one world government. We're all trapped in an underworld right now. And what I mean by that is we're all dead to the law. And to me, what God is God is the law. And we're dead to the law right now. We're in an underworld. Okay. You're civiliter mortis, civilly dead. And so when we go and look at this, and this is a little esoteric thing, but it's probably the last thing I'll bring up for the evening. So we'll go here and we'll put in Mark of the Beast. Because the one world government happened already. We're in a one world. It's a one world government already controlled by the banking system because they control all the governments through the fiat economic systems, right? So think about this. So where is it at? Receive the mark of the beast. Here we'll go 13:17, right? So we'll go to this one. And then it says, and that no man might buy or sell save that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Okay. So, and when I read this, I thought about it, I'm like, so the beast is man, but it's not man. It's man in his animalistic form, right? Like in his base consciousness. That's what the beast is. Okay. And how do they control everybody in this commercial system? Well, it's the name. I mean, one of the most mind-blowing things that I had ever heard was this guy, this judge asked this guy, he said, state your name for the record. And the man said, what makes you presume I have one? Why do you have to have one?
No, I love that. I remember.
Right. What makes you presume that I have a name? Right? Because that name is actually the artificial dead entity that they're trying to deal with. It's what's called an LEI, legal entity identification. Okay. And so that name
is that your mark?
I think so. I think the number of his name is the social security number. I think that whole period already happened. Or another possibility is that it continues to happen. Maybe what Revelations or the Bible itself as the living word just represents a cycle of the rise and fall of civilization over and over and over again, and judgment, in a never-ending loop, such as what the Ouroboros would potentially symbolize, which is the snake eating its own tail. But I'm getting a little too esoteric.
You think 7 years is 7 generations, possibly?
It could be, right? Or it could be 7 times 7, which is 49. They say you're reborn at 50. It could be. So it could be a lot of things. But what I do think is that nothing fits this so well, and nothing throughout recorded history has ever fit this so well as the Social Security number does. And the fact that it is specifically the number of your name. And the name of the beast is the LEI of the person. the legal entity identifier, which is attached to the number of his name. So I would say that the only, see, like it says, the number of the beast versus the number of a man, right? So that's your social security number. It could be, what am I? I'm not a Bible scholar, and I'm definitely not one of these thumpers or anything, but I find it interesting that it could have already taken place. And when you think about it, we're in hell now. So what do they call the king's, the chamber underneath the exchequer where the king's debtors are held? In Black's Law Dictionary, that's called hell. And we're all debtors right now. If you're a 14th Amendment citizen and you're technically dead, that's why they summon you to court, because you're dead to the law. You as a living man,
all the money in your bank account is debt anyways.
You as a living man or woman are considered dead, right? So, and it is like, I wonder if I have this Pied Pipers of Babylon. I'm going to shut this down shortly, but you guys will get a kick out of this. And the jurist members have access to this document, by the way. So it's in our Jurist Society folder. Let me pull this up. Yeah, God, this is such a good book. This Verrill K. Spear guy, he has a doctorate in common law. You can't even get a doctorate in common law anymore because they don't want anybody to know common law, right? It's called The Pied Pipers of Babylon. And this guy lays it out great. He says, so common law, as Spear defines it, is based on reason and the immutable laws of God and nature. It is the law of conscience, and as such, it cannot be only written about. Wow, that's exactly what I say, right? Let's see here. This is a bunch of stuff about it. We'll go down into the actual. Here's some quotes. Knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and a people who mean to their own governors, who mean to be their own governors, must arm themselves with the power which knowledge gives. That's James Madison. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Everybody knows about that one, right? The merchants were the powers of the earth, and the sorcerers their sorceries deceived all nations. Yeah, no shit. That's Revelation 18:23. So he comes from a very biblical approach as well, but he actually lays out, this is a great book, by the way. I haven't read all of it yet, but he lays it out not only from a biblical perspective, but he's actually a great lawyer. Like, he knows the stuff that I try to teach you guys on this channel. And so when we get into the beginning chapter, we just read a little bit of it. Hold on, that's the preface. Let's see. The signers of the Declaration of Independence and of the Constitution were well aware of the fact that there are two fundamental systems of law and consequently two fundamental systems of government. Benjamin Franklin, when asked by a gentleman about our Constitution, what kind of government did you give us? He answered, a republic, if you can keep it. In giving us a republic, they carefully delineated these two systems of government by the terms national and federal. The clearly stated purpose of the Constitutional Convention of 1787 was to eradicate a federal government and replace it with a national government, right? So he actually breaks down how the term federal actually means feudal right here. In order to understand the significance of Madison's words, we must examine the definitions of the terms federal and national. Webster's 1828 dictionary tells us that the term federal comes from the Latin feudus, meaning league. Webster goes on to define federal to mean pertaining to a league or contract derived from an agreement or covenant between parties, particularly between nations. That's what the federal government is, right? Well, now it's a corporation that's usurped everybody under it as personnel of that corporation. There is no more. So the people that were in league or in that compact together, they were the sovereign people, right? But now there is no league, or it's just all one big corporation where everyone has been reduced to personnel of this one corporation, right? You guys kind of understand what I'm saying there? So feudal is pronounced feudal, right? And is the same as feudal. Feudalism is a federal system in which the serf is bound by feudum or compact to his master or lord. The Declaration of Independence severed the hold of English feudalism over the colonists, which will be shown in this work, was being administered and enforced upon the people under the jurisdiction of Admiralty Maritime and pursuant to the principles, rules, and usages of civil law. Civil law is foreign to our country, but that's all they practice right now. The Articles of Confederation that followed was was federal in nature and totally failed to work on a free and independent people. Being free, they also rejected the lesser of two evils, American federalism as compared to British federalism. Thus, the purpose of the Constitutional Convention was stated to be for the purpose of revising the Articles of Confederation and perpetual union between the United States of America and establishing in these states a firm national government, because they intended on usurping everyone's sovereignty, like I always say. That was the whole purpose behind this country, was to basically give you freedom, make you the sovereignty, and then through your ignorance, usurp your sovereignty and give it to corporations that will now administer you as infants. But this, if you guys have an opportunity, download Pied Pipers of Babylon by Beryl K. Spears. I mean, this book is very, very powerful. And if you don't understand what's going on and I haven't been able to get through to you, this book, he goes through and lays it out very, very simply, and he gives you examples. You know what I mean? So let's see. He says, this is a review of the book, right? He says, one of the first things of interest this reviewer learned from Pipers was the cause of the American Revolution. It was not, as most people think, the tax on tea or taxation without representation. Rather, as is mentioned in two separate places in the Declaration of Independence, it was England's attempt to subject Americans to the civil law, because we were under common law. Now we're under civil law. That's because that's what this the corporate bylaws of the federal corporation that they call statutes and codes regulating the use of your property, that's civil law in a wartime state. That's why they always have to declare a state of emergency. Roman civil law is maritime admiralty law, which is wartime law, which is what they wanted to expand over everybody and bar your access to common law. Because even under that law, you should still have access to common law, but you have no common law rights in anything. You have no absolute rights over any of your property. Your entire estate's been mortgaged, and you only have equitable rights to yourself, which are civil rights. It's crazy, crazy shit. So what do you think, Corbett? What say you?
All right, let me unmute. I'm starting to come to the conclusion that the United States, as we were sold in school, has been gone since 1871, and that they just either that or they overlay this civil law over us starting then. But they continue. But I don't think they ever got rid of it, because they keep trying to sell you on it, like, oh, you're free. But yet when you go to court, you're guilty or not guilty. What happened to innocent?
That's exactly right. And not only that, but you're going into a court of equity, which means you're never going to have a fair trial by a jury of your peers. Instead, you're going to have a judge determine whether or not you've violated the trust arrangement that you're presumed to be a part of. And it's all up to his conscience. He determines absolutely whether or not you're in violation. So the word charge, that's why they use the term charge. When you're charged, is to render an estate responsible for the performance of an obligation, because you're not going in there as one of we the people to be adjudged by a jury of your peers and to request an affidavit, claiming a crime, a victim, exercising your rights. You're none of that. You are an estate, and you are a decedent infant estate. And you're
more like a battery. I'm starting to think about the Matrix here.
It is. It's a battery. It's exactly what, and they want to farm securities out of you. They want to create debt obligations out of that estate in order to siphon the productive value of that estate, which is represented by you as the 14th Amendment infant pauper, right? It's basically the Settlement and the Settlement Act and the Poor Laws of England on steroids, okay? With feudalism times a million. It's corporate neo-feudalism is what it is. But over here we have in the chat a couple of jurists. They said, I guess in response to saying whether or not I'm able to teach you guys. Benji Boodle says he's working on his seal right now. He's a member of the Jurist Society. And Jeff says that, and I want to see your seal too, Benji, once you get it designed. I like to see what you guys come up with. And Jeff says, yes, you do. I've learned so much, not only law, but also the common law, but also how to reverse engineer their system. $10. I think he meant best $10 a month I've ever invested. Yes. The Jurist Society is only $10 a month. And honestly, it's not to make money. I don't make hardly shit on, especially after StreamYard and stuff like that, but it's to bypass people who are there to troll and to basically get a little skin in being invested in what you're learning. That's all it is. I find that that's the best way to make sure that we don't have people that are coming in to either disrupt or people who are going to flake. Like, I'm going to spend a bunch of time teaching you how to do this, and then you're just going to flake out. Well, you're not going to flake out when you're actually a little bit invested in something you spend at the gas station. But outside of that, I do teach you. That's the whole idea, is how to reverse engineer what they've done. That's what I try to teach in the public shows. And that's what I teach specifically in the Jurist Society to see. In the Jurist Society, I want to say we're only in the teaching phase right now, because I want it to be meetings of equals, but we have to get everybody to see the system exactly how it exists. So I want it to be meetings that problem solve and eventually move it to a different platform. But right now it's in the growth phase. And what we teach is how to reverse engineer the system that they've placed you under. And all of that's done at the public record by basically establishing a seal, because sovereigns have seals. Like, so for instance, in the Indiana Constitution, the very first Indiana Constitution, when they were talking, the schedule of a constitution is how that government's going to be put in place, right? And in what time frame. And in the schedule, they said whoever is elected governor will use his private seal until a governor's seal can be made, because it was presumed that whoever was eligible to be governor would have a seal. And the seal, right, the seal of a foreign state, which is especially important in the situation we're in now, proves itself. It authenticates a document. It places the honor of your estate and your house on what you're putting forth on the record. It is its own consideration. It is its own collateral, basically. And so when you seal something, it makes it, like when you seal a contract, it makes it a specialty, right? And if only one person seals something but two people sign it, then the person who didn't seal it comes under the seal of the person who did. So now you know why they seal all the court paperwork they have you sign, right? You're coming under them. You're coming under their house. So it's very, very important. There's a lot of aspects of this, but it's all done on the county record. And basically, you create your seal, and then you file your claim, declaration of status, and part of your claim is a performance contract with a vicious arbitration clause in it. The same type of arbitration clause that software companies use against you. By using this website, you agree to our terms of use and et cetera, which is like an 85-page document you're never going to read. And just by using the website, you automatically come subject to their contract, which a lot of software companies and websites and stuff use an arbitration clause as part of their contract, so they can choose the ground on which they're going to take your money. And that's what we do. We do the same thing. So I appreciate the compliments, guys, and I'm very happy to have you in the Jurist Society. We have awesome meetings every weekend. But anyways, I recommend everybody get this book, Pied Pipers of Babylon. And of course, jurists have free access to this book on the in our Jurist Society folder. It's definitely in there.
It is in the folder?
Oh yeah, it's in there. I made sure when I set the folder up initially, I made sure this was one of them that was in there.
All right.
This is a very, very good resource. I still read it and learn things, especially esoterically, because he comes like J.G. Warner said, the sphere of the law is entirely spiritual because it works upon and through the will alone. So when you come to the study of law with a spiritual understanding of how they're manipulating the positive and negative forces, or the knowledge of good and evil, to enslave you in the form of credit and debt, you start to learn things about the way the world works in a spiritual sense as well. Like, such as why they, by learning law and why they always have to get you to contract, you learn why they always have to show you what they're going to do in movies and television shows and magazines and all this. They always have to tell you what they're preparing to do, because it requires your consent for them to do it. Otherwise, the benevolent forces of the universe, the positive forces of the universe, will thwart whatever it is that they're trying to do, which I think we witnessed recently. And the pandemic is the best example of that principle in action. I do not think that went the way they intended. And I think enough people withdrew or refused consent to their bullshit that it ended up falling apart and crumbling. And that's, but they got a lot of people. They got a ton of people, but they did it through their consent. And, if you look at these these different, like I think Australia, and correct me if I'm wrong, any of my subs from Australia, but I think one of your PMs of one of the countries or states over there came out and said, yeah, we know that this thing is killing people, but we didn't force you to take it. You did it on your own. You came and voluntarily took it. It's like, ooh, you did force us though, but no, technically we didn't. Well, I couldn't work. Yeah, well, I mean, if you were self-sufficient and not dependent on the corporations for your livelihood, then you could have survived and worked, and see how they get you through the dependency. And so now they're able to just kind of wash their hands, be like, well, you did it. You did it to yourself.
Well, it's kind of easy to do when you create a monopoly.
Right. No, I know. That's why they create the monopoly. But we still, especially in our republic here in the United States, but really everywhere, you can still learn how to be self-sufficient, and you can remove your dependency from the system, And so it's a lot harder in other countries. I give you that. So it's much easier said than done. But here in the United States, it's still fairly easily done. It's doable. It's simple. Let's say that it's simple, not easy, because you can learn a trade, or you can even go collect pallet wood and start building furniture. You could do any number of things to make money. You could literally go collect cans that the grocery stores throw away because they don't go in the machine there. And you could make a system out of that. And you know what I mean? Like there's all sorts of money lying around. You just have to learn how to see it. And when you're not dependent on the corporations for that money, then they literally lose their power and control over you, because dependency is the key. It's the key to this entire thing. And so it's all about, Bill, like Dylan says, it's all about building a community too. It's one of the purposes of immigration. They want to bring all these people who are from foreign cultures, foreign countries that cannot assimilate with us, and try to force us to assimilate with them, which causes tension and resentment. And then next thing you know, you have entire communities segmented and opposed to one another, which is why they've been playing the black-white thing for so long, which I hope, again, I'll reiterate this, I hope nobody's fallen for the Austin Metcalf thing. And now there's a new one where some lady called some little black kid the N-word, and this guy, who was apparently a PDF and not even supposed to be on the playground in the first place, filmed her and confronted her about calling the kid that. And then she basically called him one too, told him to F off. And then now there's like this huge racial tension on the social media platforms between, once again, blacks and whites, same thing they always do. And now there's a GoFundMe for this lady that's raised like $350,000 or something crazy, right? So you got the black kid that kills the white kid down in Texas, gets $600,000 in a GoFundMe, and now you got the white chick that calls the little black kid the N-word, and she gets $350,000. They're really trying to make us go at each other. It's just like we're red and black ants in a jar, and they're shaking that fucker up real hard right now. And I hope nobody falls for it, at least nobody that subscribes to my channel. Hope you guys see through the illusion of all these staged events. Everything's one big fucking play. It's one play. Everything that you see is being fed to you by artificial intelligence in order to engineer your emotions and your reactions in such a way to basically get the desired result that they're looking for, the controllers are looking for. And that's what's happening right now. It's what's always happening. Everything you see on TV, all the news stories, all that shit is fake. 9 times out of 10, never even happened. 9 times out of 10.
That's my assumption. Always. I always assume everything's fake. I just laugh. The only things I believe are what my cognitive bias wants me to believe.
I don't believe anything unless I personally research. I'll tell you what I believe. I believe things I can trace back to the law, because they can't change the law. The law builds on itself. So if you want to learn the truth of any historical event, learn the law of that period and what was put on record. Because those things, they can never be altered or changed, because for instance, if you changed the way something was done in the Civil War, they would potentially collapse their entire system that's set up now, because it's all built on that. It's all like, say, the 14th Amendment, just by changing that one little thing, if you took that out, the entire system collapses and on itself.
You saw the shenanigans that went on in Lincoln's the trial of the people that were involved in the murder of Lincoln?
Oh yeah, and they ended up acquitting.
Yeah, there's some sketchy shit. So You know, you may say, "Oh, this is the court." You can go back and listen to the court record and read it, but there was a lot of shenanigans that went on in that.
Well, not only that, that entire plot, when you look at that entire plot, the plot wasn't just to kill Lincoln. It was a plot to kill President Lincoln, Vice President Johnson, right? Ulysses S. Grant, and Secretary of State William Seward. And this act, you never learn this in school. You just learn, oh, Lincoln got shot. You don't learn that Ulysses S. Grant went out of town the day his assassin was supposed to get him to visit a sick friend, so his assassin missed him. Andrew Johnson's assassin chickened out. William Seward, the Secretary of the State at the time, his assassin did try to kill him. He went and stabbed William Seward a bunch of times, but somehow William Seward, and you never learn that. You never learn that the Secretary of State was brutally stabbed a bunch of times by an attempted assassin, part of the same group that did kill Lincoln, right? And then, of course, John Wilkes Booth was successful in shooting Lincoln. And so, but you don't learn the rest of it, that it was all one big plan coordinated by, what was the guy's name? I always forget his name. But essentially, it was a plot by a Catholic secret society, essentially, is what happened. So, and of course, that being the birthplace and home of Roman civil law, you can kind of see how that is kind of the nexus web of and it's a shame because both the Catholic Church is the one church that was started by Christ, but then of course Rome intermixed with that whole situation, and now it's become both. I guess that's why they're symbolized. They hold the keys to the kingdom because they're both the God and the devil of the world, basically. I guess, right? I don't know. That's up to you guys to decide. But yeah, that whole assassination situation, very, very interesting, very interesting. And why can't John Surratt? John Surratt was the guy who was caught. So this is how you know that it was a Catholic or that it was planned by Catholic secret society, because John Wilkes Booth was a member of the Golden Circle, which is a secret society. And then John Surratt, after John Wilkes Booth, they got him and they got William Seward's assassin and they got Mary Surratt, who was John's mother, and they were all devout Catholics. And that was the home in which the entire plan was hatched. John Surratt fled to Canada, and then he was hidden by a bishop of a small town up in Canada. I forget the town, and they smuggled him over to Rome, or over to I don't think the Vatican exists at that point, but they smuggled him over to Rome, and he became a member of the Pope's Guard, the Pope's army over there. And somebody recognized him over there, John Surratt. And of course, he was like the most wanted man in the world because he just killed the United States president. So they turned him in and he got shipped back over here, and they did a trial. But because, of course, they haven't implemented the Roman law system yet, it was still common law, and he was tried by a jury of his peers, and that jury acquitted him. Whereas nowadays, if they tried somebody, it wouldn't matter what the fuck the jury wanted to do. Period. So that's just how that works. And the only time that the jury does actually influence is when they want you to think the jury influences it, because the judge is the god of equity, and that's the court system they have us in. But anyway, I'm going to shut this down. I appreciate Corbett. It's been awesome having you, even though I've been mostly rambling. You've been mostly listening. I appreciate your input. I honestly do. Yeah. And I would like to give you the opportunity to say something to everybody before we tune out of here.
Well, I hope everybody here understands that becoming a jurist is probably the most important thing you can do for yourself and your family. So even if you just do your house and your seal, there's something that happens to you when you get accomplish that. And I have not done it, but I can tell you, I've seen the change in the people that have worked on it.
I agree with you. Yeah, 100%. It changed. Learning the law changes your perspective on life in general. And so I see a couple of people asking about the Jurist Society over in the comments. And let me drop a link in the comments, and I'm going to edit the description for people who watch this afterwards to include both information on the International Truth Expo as well as. Oh
yeah! Congratulations! This is the first time I've heard of that.
I'm pretty excited.
Like you told us, but I don't remember you ever mentioning it. I looked into it. You're right. It's in December.
November. It's in November.
Was it?
Yep, it's in November, and it should be a a very good time, actually. So, like I said, Mark Sargent, his co-host, whose name I always forget, are going to be there.
His
And
co-host. Oh, you mean oh shoot, the gay guy. I can't remember his name. I met them both. I know him.
and a couple other big names. And she's working on the lineup right now. But there's going to be, she's got musicians. She's got musicians coming.
Sure.
She's going to have, it's going to be an indoor expo, and there's going to be an outdoor aspect to it. So
Who's putting it on? Who's starting it?
her name's Carol with a K. I don't know her actual
Okay.
last name, but Carol with a K. She was in the chat earlier, I think.
Okay.
Let me go ahead and see if I can pull up this. I'll pull up this link to the international.
I'll start promoting this. I mean, we might even fly out and come visit that one. That sounds like fun.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. My wife's excited about it, and it's in a really cool area. Quartzsite is. We were looking at pictures, and it looks absolutely gorgeous out there.
Yeah, and we can camp. You said, correct?
Yes, camp. Well, that's primarily what it's going to be. If you guys want to get a hotel, if you guys.
Oh, you mean you can be self-sufficient?
Yeah.
Camp.
Me
Yeah,
personally,
amen.
I will be camping.
Yeah.
Because I think that's cool, and that's going to be where all the fun is, and everybody's going to be, hanging out and talking, having fun, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm going to here's the International Truth Expo link as well. I'm going to put in the comments if you guys want to check out.
Yeah, I looked it up while we were talking.
I'll put it for everyone else.
I'll send an email to Mark and ask him a little bit more. Just find out what's going on.
International Truth Expo, I think. Yep, right here is Carol. Carol's right here.
Huh. Yeah.
Boom. So there's the YouTube too. Just click on her name, and I'm going to put all this stuff in the description once I get off here. Shut this down, but it should be a good time. And then if you're interested in joining the Jurist Society, that also, I put the link in the comments, and I'll put it, if you're watching this afterwards, I'll put it in the description. But you'll have access to another thing on top of, obviously like my personal counsel. You'll have access to a huge library of templates for paperwork. You'll obviously have the template for the claim that you're going to put on the record to claim your estate, how to create your seal, where to create your seal. And you'll have access to books like this, Pied Pipers of Babylon. I have so many treaties on common law, trust, corporations, mortgages, de facto government, just so much information. You probably couldn't even read it all in a lifetime, but you can go through it. And that's what I do with a lot of the treaties. I just go through and I search through them. And then here's the guy that actually wanted to debate me. Can you tell me what the difference between law and equity is? I'll tell you what, as soon as you leave a comment or you email me and give me an accurate explanation of the difference between law and equity, I might consider debating it. So we'll leave that out there, because otherwise I'm not going to waste my time. You are just trying to get clicks, or you're trying to, so all common nonsense is BS. It's not, oh my God, this guy is an idiot. Yeah, that's exactly why I wouldn't debate you. You have no idea how the law works. Common law is the law. It's the original jurisdiction, bro. It's every other jurisdiction comes out of common law. Pick up a book. Jesus. Yeah, so this guy.
Natural law. It's written on the heart. You're born with it, unless you're a psychopath.
Well, not only that, but there's an entire body. So like how Verrill K. Spears says, it's not written, it's written about, right? You can't write it, it's written about. And
well, I had that epiphany because you talked about how the Vikings refused to let people write the law down, because once you start writing it down, you can manipulate it through the words.
Exactly.
And I find it interesting. In order to reclaim our estates, we have to write it down.
You'll see the body of law. The body of common law, though, is encapsulated in common law rulings, the rulings of juries, because the only thing common law is basically this: don't violate someone else's free will. That's what also trespass, replevin is reclaiming your property. It all involves property, and it involves having absolute property rights. But common law essentially boils down to just do not violate someone else's free will. If you take someone's property, that's violating their free will. All common law crimes are violations of free will. And that's what law actually is. The breaking of law requires a victim, right? So how are you going and getting locked up for driving without permission to drive, right? Well, that's because that's not law. That's the stipulation of a contract or a trust arrangement that you're under, right? Now, that trust arrangement was created out of common law through presumption using various principles of common law, such as accepting welfare and benefits, or and presumption of infancy, lunacy, whatever the case may be, non compos mentis. All these things take you from common law and put you under administration. You can only be in common law if you're capable of exercising your free will and owning property. Now, if you're not able to own property, if you're an infant or any type of, you come out of this branches off of common law into administrative law. And administrative law is its own body of law that stems from common law, but then creates an entirely different system of law based on the rules and regulation of property regarding the use of property. That's how it works. It's that simple. If you don't see that, you're a retard. I don't know what to tell you. But this is a fact. It's backed up many, many times by, this entire book for one thing, and which Verrill K. Spear, you can look it up. He has a doctorate in common law, and so you got a doctorate in nothing. Is that what you're saying? And something that's not real, right? You can look at the Magna Carta of 1215. You can look at the Magna Carta of 1215, and you can go all the way up to the Northwest Ordinance that created the territory northwest of the River Ohio. And the principles of common law are exactly the same, unchanged, all regarding the descent and inheritance of property, and basically the maintenance of estates and the administration of decedent estates, right? Or not decedent, of infant estates. Right, which is that right there, that little pocket of common law is how they spawn this entire system of commercial law, is the administration of infant estates, intestate estates. That's how they did it. So anyway, oh my God, look at this. I love this. Watch. So he says the Magna Carta is not U.S. law. Oh man, I can't wait for this. Look at this.
Ask Michigan.
Yeah, why don't we just ask Michigan about it? This is Haiti. This is Michigan compiled laws 1929, if it ever loads, right? Michigan compiled law 1929's preliminary chapters. Chapter 1, Magna Carta. Chapter 2, Declaration of Independence. Chapter 3, Constitution of the United States. You are a retard, bro. So I'm not going to waste my time talking to you, bud. So. Anyways, the rest of you, thank you for joining me. And thank you, of course, Corbett, for joining me as well.
Yeah, no problem. You want me to turn my phone around? You want a little puppy time? It's kind
for
of
sure,
funny.
but look, here we go. Yeah. He says, so what? Yeah, you're a retard, dude. It's not, it's the very foundation of all the administrative law that they're using. Yes, it is. That's why I will not.
He's not serious. He's just trolling you.
Yeah, he doesn't know what he's talking about. But go ahead. Let's give us
Especially
some
if he's been listening. All right. I think I turned my camera around. Oh, I got to turn my camera on. Let me turn the camera on. Ah, there I am.
Here, let me give you the solo layout.
There you go.
That's a good way to end a stream right there. That is.
Come here, Rolo. Romeo. Come here, you little buggers. Can you see him?
Very adorable.
This is the one we're keeping. That's Milo. Isn't that cute? All right.
It's very adorable.
I hope you saw it.
No, I definitely seen it. We all seen it. I put you up big on the screen. So.
All right, thanks.
Yeah,
it's just a nice way to end it.
So, and to answer Misinformation Agent's question, Hathi Trust is a compilation of old law books, and it's a historical site. So it's this is photocopied directly from the University of Michigan. What I had up on the screen was photocopied directly from the University of Michigan. If you don't believe me, you can go find the Michigan compiled laws, 1929. Prove me wrong, but I know I'm not. So anyways, thank you guys for joining me, and thank you, Corbett, for showing us your puppies. It's always awesome. I appreciate you. And I will see you. Well, I'll see you tomorrow.
Anybody who wants one? I got 2 left.
They're for sale, he said. I'll see you tomorrow at the meeting with the Jurist Society at 4:00. Between 4 and 4:30, I'll set it up and we'll get together. And then anybody else who would like to join the Jurist Society, you can tune in for tomorrow. It's every Sunday at 4. And that's when we meet and we go over stuff. And I would, always welcome new members. So you guys have an awesome day. And Corbett, you have an awesome day with those puppies.